Have you ever faced a betrayal so public, so humiliating, that you could feel your entire world collapse in front of hundreds of watching eyes? If yes, then you'll understand why my story still burns in my memory like fire. The day began with joy, balloons, cheers, and proud parents crowding into the auditorium. It was my daughter Emily's graduation day. For me, this wasn't just a ceremony, it was a symbol of everything Richard, my husband, and I had worked for his parents. We had sacrificed vacations, dinners, and even small luxuries just to give her the best education possible. And now, watching her march toward the stage, my heart swelled with pride. Richard was seated a few rows ahead. He was dressed neatly in a navy suit, but he seemed distracted. His leg bounced, his phone lit up again and again, and he kept glancing to his side. That's when I noticed her, a young woman with glossy hair, sitting far too close to him. She wasn't a relative. She wasn't one of Emily's friends. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to look away. When Emily's name was called, I clapped with all my heart. Richard, however, clapped mechanically, his gaze darting once again toward that woman. A knot of dread coiled in my stomach. Something was wrong. After the ceremony, families poured out into the open courtyard to take pictures. Laughter and chatter filled the air. Emily posed with her classmates, smiling despite the tears in her eyes. Then suddenly, Richard cleared his throat and raised his voice, loud enough for everyone around us to hear. I have something to say. The crowd quieted. My daughter froze. I turned toward him, every nerve in my body on edge. Richard took a deep breath, his voice trembling yet determined. I've decided to start a new life. Without you, Margaret. Gasps erupted. Emily's mascara smudged as tears streamed down her face. I stood rooted, my ears ringing. Richard gestured toward the mysterious woman. This is Claire. She's the person I want to be with. The courtyard fell silent except for the clicking of cameras and the whispers of shocked relatives. I felt my entire world collapse in front of me. My daughter's milestone moment had turned into my humiliation. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. Instead, I forced a calm smile onto my lips, though inside my blood boiled hotter than I'd ever known. Congratulations on your honesty, Richard, I said evenly, loud enough for the entire crowd. Really, congratulations. That smile unsettled him. He expected a scene. He expected tears. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't going to crumble. I was going to fight back, quietly, patiently, and when the time came, he wouldn't even see it coming. That night, Emily locked herself in her room, sobbing uncontrollably. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the wall clock as the seconds ticked by. Every moment replayed in my mind, his restless glances, his sudden announcement, the smug tilt of his chin as he stood beside Claire. But my sorrow quickly hardened into clarity. I remembered all the excuses, the late meetings, the urgent business trips, the hushed phone calls at night. The truth was obvious now. He had been planning this for months, maybe even years. Then another thought hit me like a cold wave. Our finances. Richard had always been in charge of the larger investments. I trusted him blindly. If he had been plotting this escape, what were the chances he had already drained accounts or hidden assets under his name? Fueled by suspicion, I grabbed my laptop. Passwords weren't difficult. I had lived with the man for 20 years. Within an hour, the truth glared at me in numbers and transactions. He had transferred massive sums into a private account, preparing to vanish with Claire, leaving Emily and me with almost nothing. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anger. If Richard thought I was naive, he was about to learn that I had claws sharper than his arrogance could ever imagine. Because what he didn't know was that for years, I had quietly kept backups, copies of documents, records of transactions, notes about suspicious behavior, a quiet habit born out of instinct. And now, it would become my weapon. The next morning, Richard strolled back into the house, his face smug, as though yesterday's humiliation had been nothing more than a formal announcement. Emily refused to look at him, retreating upstairs. He carried a small suitcase and began gathering clothes from the closet. I'll transfer some money for your expenses until you figure things out, he said casually, as though abandoning us was no bigger deal than canceling a subscription. I folded my arms, masking the storm raging inside me. That's thoughtful of you, Richard. Don't worry. I'll figure things out sooner than you think. He smirked, mistaking my calm for weakness. Little did he know that I was already planning my first move. In the days that followed, Gossip spread like wildfire through the community. Neighbors whispered behind curtains. Friends offered pitying glances. Some said I should have seen it coming. Others said I was better off without him. None of them knew that I wasn't wallowing in sorrow. I was gathering ammunition. Every evening, I combed through files, receipts, and hidden notes. I remembered his office drawer, the one he always kept locked. And I knew, if there was more to his double life, it would be there. One night, when Richard was flaunting Claire at a local restaurant, I slipped into his office. Being married to him had its advantages. I knew every code, every lock, every safe. Inside a drawer, I found a folder. My heart pounded as I flipped through the pages. Proof, dozens of fraudulent transactions, fake invoices, shady deals, even evidence of tax evasion. Richard wasn't just a cheating husband, he was a criminal. I photographed everything, each click of the camera sealing his fate. This wasn't just about emotional revenge anymore. It was about justice, about showing Richard that when you betray the wrong woman, you don't just lose love, you lose everything. But I didn't strike immediately. Oh no. Revenge is sweetest when served cold, when the target has no idea it's coming. For now, I let him enjoy his freedom. I smiled politely when he came to the house to collect more things. I nodded when he promised to stay in touch with Emily. I even accepted the small amounts of money he transferred, knowing full well that soon, every cent he owned would be out of his hands. Because patience, I knew, would be my deadliest weapon. And Richard had just handed me every reason to use it. The days after Richard's betrayal felt surreal. Emily tried returning to her studies, but her eyes often lingered on her father's empty chair at the dinner table. Sometimes she would ask me quietly, "Mom, why did he choose her? Wasn't our family enough?" And every time, I hugged her, swallowing my own tears, whispering, "He didn't leave because of us, Emily. He left because of who he is." Inside, however, I was far from broken. I was planning, carefully, silently, strategically. Richard thought humiliation would make me weak, but he had underestimated me. A week later, the perfect opportunity presented itself. Richard and Claire organized a lavish housewarming party in their luxury apartment. It was their way of flaunting their new life, rubbing salt in my wounds. Invitations went out to colleagues, family members, even neighbors. Everyone who had once admired our marriage was now invited to witness Richard's rebirth. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't matter. I was going anyway. That night, I dressed in my most elegant black gown, my hair pinned neatly, my lips painted crimson. I walked into that party like a queen walking into enemy territory. Conversations hushed. Heads turned. Richard's smug smile faltered. "What are you doing here, Margaret?" he hissed, storming toward me. "Oh, Richard," I purred, my smile unshakable. "How could I miss this? After all, it's such a special occasion. And I brought a little gift." Gasps echoed as I laid a leather folder on the table. Guests leaned in, curiosity crackling in the air. Richard's face drained of color. "Shall we go through it together?" I asked sweetly. "Or would you prefer I hand it directly to the authorities?" Inside the folder were photographs of every fraudulent deal, every fake invoice, every trace of his financial crimes. Claire blinked in confusion, whispering, "Richard, what is this?" But I didn't stay to watch the full fallout. I simply smiled, turned on my heel, and left. Sometimes, revenge didn't need fireworks. Sometimes, silence spoke louder than any scream. The next morning, Richard appeared at my door, furious. "You had no right," he bellowed. "Those files, how did you even get them?" I folded my arms. "You should know better than anyone, Richard. Living with a man like you, a woman learns to keep records." He slammed his fist against the wall. "You're bluffing. You wouldn't dare ruin me." "Oh, I dare," I replied calmly. "And I haven't even started yet." For the first time, I saw it, the flicker of fear in his eyes. From that day forward, Richard grew restless. His calls to Emily became more frequent, almost desperate. He tried painting me as the villain, telling her I was poisoning her against him. But Emily was no fool. She had seen his betrayal with her own eyes. Then, one evening, Emily came home shaken. "Mom, I think someone's been following me after class." My blood ran cold. I knew Richard was desperate, but to use intimidation against his own daughter? That was a line I couldn't forgive. "It's him," I whispered, my fists clenching. "He's circling like a vulture." That night, I called Detective Harris, a man who had quietly been monitoring Richard ever since his suspicious business practices had surfaced. I handed him everything, The photographs, the digital files, even the recordings of Richard's late-night threats. "This is enough," Harris said firmly. "We'll take him in soon. But be ready, men like Richard rarely surrender without a fight." I nodded, my jaw set. I've been ready for months. The final showdown came quicker than expected. It was Friday afternoon, parent-teacher conferences at my school. I was busy speaking with Emily's professors when the classroom door burst open. Richard stormed in, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, his voice echoing like thunder. "You ruined me, Margaret," he roared, startling both teachers and parents. "Do you have any idea what I've lost because of you?" Every head turned. Gasps filled the room. Children clung to their mothers. My heart pounded, but I stood tall. "No, Richard," I said firmly. "You ruined yourself." I just held up the mirror. His face twisted with rage. He lunged toward me, and for a split second, I thought this was the end. But then, crash, the door slammed open, and officers swarmed in. Detective Harris at the lead. They pinned Richard to the ground as he thrashed and screamed, his voice cracking with fury. The room fell silent except for the sobs of frightened children. Emily stood frozen near the back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mom, is it over?" she whispered. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. "Yes, sweetheart, it's finally over." But of course, it wasn't truly over. The trial stretched on for months. Lawyers argued. Evidence piled high. Witnesses came forward. Every scheme Richard had ever built crumbled under the weight of truth. Fraud, embezzlement, harassment. The charges stacked against him like bricks in a prison wall. Claire, she didn't even show up. She had abandoned him long before the trial, leaving Richard to rot in his own downfall. When the judge finally pronounced his sentence, 15 years behind bars, there was no applause, no joy, no victory dance. Just peace. A deep, quiet peace that washed over me like a tide. At last, the ghost of betrayal had been buried. Life slowly stitched itself together again. Emily threw herself into her studies, eventually graduating with honors. I stood beside her proudly, not as a woman broken by betrayal, but as a mother who had risen stronger from its ashes. Friends often asked me, "How did you endure it all? How didn't you collapse under the humiliation and anger?" My answer was always the same. Revenge isn't about shouting the loudest. It's about waiting, planning, and striking when it matters most. And in Richard's case, patience had been my deadliest weapon. Richard's arrest sent ripples through the entire community. Parents whispered about it during school pickups. Colleagues stopped by my desk to offer awkward sympathy, and Emily's friends treated her with a mixture of pity and awe. Our once private pain had become a public scandal, but strangely, that no longer frightened me. For the first time in years, I walked into my classroom with my head held high, not because I was proud of the chaos Richard left behind, but because I had survived it. My students didn't see a broken woman. They saw a teacher who smiled again, who poured her heart into every lesson, who laughed at their jokes instead of drifting into silence. Emily, too, began to heal. She spoke about her father less and less, and when his name did come up, it was without tears. She focused on her studies, her friends, and her dreams of building a future that wasn't clouded by betrayal. As for Richard, his trial dragged on for months. Every hearing revealed more about the web of lies he had spun: fraud, embezzlement, false accounts, harassment. He sat there in the courtroom, once the man I trusted with everything, now reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. Claire had vanished long before, leaving him to face his downfall alone. The day the judge sentenced him to 15 years in prison, I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. Justice, I realized, isn't always about celebration. Sometimes it's simply about peace. And peace is exactly what Emily and I finally found. On Emily's graduation day, as she walked across the stage with honors, I stood in the crowd, not as a woman betrayed, but as a mother who had rebuilt her world from ashes. My applause echoed louder than anyone's, filled with pride, strength, and the promise of a new beginning. At night, I sometimes sit by the window, sipping tea, watching the quiet world outside. I wonder if Richard ever thinks of us, if he regrets the choices that led him here. But then I remind myself, it doesn't matter anymore. He lost everything, and Emily and I, we found freedom. Have you ever witnessed betrayal so deep it shook the very foundation of your life? If yes, share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if this story touched your heart, Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful tales of resilience and justice. Tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Your voices make this community stronger every day.